Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so this episode actually splices up the end of the Babyface arc as well as the new arc that's going to be coming up, kind of, sort of, but, yeah, this episode kind of showcases the end of Giorno's fight against Babyface and, sets up some things for the new arc going in, and, also introduces what is probably my new favorite stand a lot, but, in case this episode opens up with, Risotto, who, I'm going to re-picture because I don't remember if I did, but, he showed, but Risotto, who has been working in the background for most of this, he actually winds up, well, he just goes up to an analyst and kind of threatens him to digitally recreate and analyze something that, we don't find out about until later, but, he basically threatens the guy, pointing out that, he needs to have whatever it is he found recreated, and the guy kind of just gives him a little bit of lip, pointing out that Risotto should know better than to go after the boss. And the guy and that Risotto actually uses his stand. We don't see what the stand is. All we see is what it does, and it's something metal related. That's the only thing that we're shown. It's he summons his stand, which we don't get to see, and he embeds several nails into the dude's hand, and tells him that his eye will go next, and tells him that if he doesn't hurry up, as long as he has his right eye and right hand, that he'll be perfectly fine. But the man just continues to keep talking, telling him that he should know that it's pointless to go up against the boss, and points out that those that do disappear and get erased, as in his own actual words. But Risotto, true to his word, then jams something into his eye and winds up not killing him, but kind of incapacitating him a little bit so that he's forced to work. But in any case, back at the actual fight, we then see Giorno facing off against Babyface, and it recaps what Giorno's technique from last episode, where he used his hands and turned it into a piranha to kind of blow a hole through the back of Babyface, and despite that, Babyface is still very much standing in a little bit of pain, and also to kind of add insult to injury, he landed in turtle crap, so he's not having a very good time at the start of this episode. But obviously, our old pal Malone has no idea what's actually going on. He's just seeing it on the other end of his display, and he has no idea what's going on, and he really doesn't understand what's going on. He's just seeing everything about how the stand is fighting back and just his reactions to things, but he kind of doesn't have any real hands-on control. But Giorno is ultimately a little confused, pointing out that obviously this is a thing where Babyface is a remote-controlled stand and therefore does not get hurt, but or at least doesn't get hurt in the way that other stand users might get hurt. But Giorno doesn't know this and hasn't yet figured out that it is indeed a remote stand that in no way will be reflected damage back to its user. Realizing he then needs to actually fight back against the stand, and defeat it to return Bruno and Triss back to normal. He then proceeds to get ready to fight it, and recalls it, and then proceeds to recall his hand to get it back. Sure enough, in the process, then proceeds to start throwing hands with Babyface. But by this point, and Babyface initially starts by trying to hit Giorno, but Giorno has already seen through its technique, having seen its attack 3 times already, and now knows what he's doing to actually defend against it. But then Babyface just kind of does a downward strike on him, and winds up cutting him, which causes Giorno to become confused, pointing out that its range seems to have extended. And sure enough, Babyface actually undergoes another evolution, this time getting a lot bigger and actually kind of having a more adult form. And sure enough, Malone comments that this is a result of it just being pissed off. As we've established, the way Babyface works is that it'll actually evolve over time. And sure enough, it gets stronger here because Giorno pissed it off. So, at which point Malone comments that he found a perfect mother for his junior. But In any case, the two then proceed to actually face off, with Giorno actually throwing a punch to try and hit Babyface in the head, pointing out that if he destroys the Stan's head, it'll return his friends back to normal. But Babyface in response just kind of shifts his head and hand around, so that Giorno just winds up punching his hand, and with that he winds up taking Giorno's hand, declaring that he's finally won the battle, and proceeds to throw another punch to finish Giorno off. But it's at this point where Giorno reveals that Babyface is already lost. And as it turns out, Babyface wasn't paying attention. Giorno didn't actually recall his hand at all. As we find out, he actually wound up turning the motorcycle into a fake hand to begin with. Which was the thing that he's been doing throughout this episode. If you guys remember, he's been throughout this entire fight. He's been doing that, but it's at this point where Babyface finally realizes what Giorno did, and Giorno just explained that since he's now taken the motorcycle inside of himself, it's now become a part of him. And sure enough, the motorcycle then proceeds to burst out of Babyface and badly injures it, because obviously it's got a motorcycle inside it. But Babyface then declares that it's not going to lose this way, and that it can still break itself up into pieces to escape. But Giorno then points out that he wouldn't do that if he were it, but because, as he points out, there's actually a lot of gasoline that obviously bikes have gasoline in them, and he points out that that it would probably make a very big explosion to finish him off. At which point Babyface too late realizes that one of the spark plugs from the bike is now exposed in his shoulder, and he basically just blows up. That's how Giorno finishes him off. He blows up and is now on fire. And he has no way of actually responding to any of that. But in any case, Giorno actually does wind up defeating Babyface this way, and with its body parts now completely severed, proceeds to punch it in the head to finish it off, which does wind up freeing Trish and Bruno inside of the turtle, and they remark that Giorno seems to have defeated the Stand, which they're very thankful to him for that. But in case Ghiaccio, who we actually have met him in a previous episode, but again, I'm picturing him here because I think this is like his first major appearance. He actually is in a call with Risotto, and is on his way to the location where Giorno and Babyface actually originally fought. He's actually at the lot where they were, but as they're talking, Risotto actually tells him that he wound up finding a thing. He actually wound up finding a thing that they need, that they're likely going to need, and concludes that the users are likely that Bucciarati's team is actually likely looking into it as well, and tells him to look around, and sure enough, Ghiaccio just kind of checks in and points out that he definitely sees signs that the team was there, but then proceeds to point out that everybody seems to be gone, and weirdly yet all of the cars seem to be missing as well. So he has no idea where any of them are, and then proceeds to point that out to Risotto, but Risotto tells him to stay calm and just tell Malone what happened. So yeah, sure enough, he then proceeds to call up Malone and let him know what's going on. But in the process, he actually does kind of reveal that he's not very good at metaphors. As we find out, he shows up at the scene to investigate, and he understands the idea of leave no stone unturned, but he also doesn't understand taking a leaf out of somebody else's book, because obviously the idea of taking a leaf out of somebody else's book means you're opening of the book, noting that somebody has a different thing, and then somebody is doing something, and then you kind of quite literally take the page out of their book and copy it for yourself. That's more or less what the thing is. It's like you're using the same playbook they do, but he doesn't fully understand what that is, and also doesn't understand why that leaf is actually another word for page. So he just kind of goes into a bit of a freak out and starts punching his windshield and dashboard before calling Malone and telling him what happened. Malone has already since figured out that Babyface has been disabled. He found out very quickly after Giorno defeated that he's lost contact with it, and sure enough, when Ghiaccio actually calls him and reveals that what happened, he points out that obviously he knows what's gone on, but he's not discouraged, because as he points out, he still has Bruno's blood and can still continue to track him by creating as many juniors as he wants. And sure enough, once he calls up as he's calling up Ghiaccio, he's already started scoping out his next target to actually make into another babyface. But it's at this point where he notices a snake and has no idea why it's there, because as he points out, a snake should be nowhere near the station in Rome where he is. But in any case, he then proceeds to look for the snake, with Ghiaccio not fully understanding what's going on, and but Malone merely tells him that the only thing they really need to worry about is the newbie, pointing out that they still don't know what his powers are, and points out that obviously they just need to keep an eye on Giorno and try to figure out what his powers are so they can defeat him. But it's at this point where the snake actually winds up landing on his shoulder, having slithered around the top of the train and landing on top of him, and Ghiaccio and Malone actually winds up panicking because he notes that the snake is smoking. And realizing that Bruno turned Babyface's charred remains into the snake, he then realizes what Giorno's power is a little bit too late, and the snake then proceeds to bite him on the tongue, and in the process he falls over and breaks the vial of Bruno's blood that he had, which kind of takes him out of commission. And though we don't actually see it, it's heavily implied that he dies off screen, since obviously he got bit by a poisonous snake, and he dies just off screen. And Ghiaccio even comments on it as well from his car, pointing out that obviously that means that Ghiaccio has been defeated as well, and that obviously Ghiaccio realizes that Malone has been defeated as well, and concluding that and realizing that they're now down a member, he then resolves to actually defeat Giorno by his own hands, and track him down and try to figure out where Trish is. And then meanwhile, once they've gotten a safe distance away, the rest of Team Bucciarati actually winds up going to Team Bucciarati actually winds up thinking about what their next move should be, and since now they only have a couple of stand users left. It's at this point where we actually find out what exactly it is that Risotto actually found. As we later find out, Bruno then gets another order from the boss, which he then opens on his laptop, and after reading it through, discovers that it actually involves Baccio. So he tells Baccio to come meet with him, and he then shows him the order, explaining how he needs to rewind exactly back to about 14 hours. And also to focus on the one chair that's in there, and pointing out, and Baccio immediately gets it, since he obviously used to work as a detective, so he immediately figures out that somebody was most likely in the turtle before them, and they're likely going to find out the identity of who placed the turtle for them in the station when they got there. But to this point where Baccio actually summons his Moody Blues and proceeds to rewind to the time specified in the order. And what we find out is that Pericolo was actually the one who left the turtle, and we also find out what happened to him, and kind of reveals a little bit about what was going on when Risotto actually showed up and stole the thing from the station. And what we find out, and this was actually to prevent the information from actually leaking. But what we found out is that Pericolo, he left them a message in a very covert way that only Moody Blues would be able to uncover. Basically through Moody Blues, Pericolo then proceeds to relay his final message to them, which is that they're to go to a certain station in Venice once they get there, and reveals that there's actually a line station. I forget specifically what the station is called, but he tells them to go to the station in Venice, and tells them that there's actually a special CD that they need that they'll actually be able to use to actually go and retreat to actually bring it to Trish, so that Trish can actually be returned back to the boss. And that it actually has orders on the disc for them. So, and with that, he then proceeds to burn the picture, which Baccio then freeze frames to prevent it from completely burning, so they can figure out what's going on with it. And sure enough, Sure enough, Bruno actually does recognize where the statue is and knows exactly where they need to go. So he points out that they'll likely need to send somebody to actually go and retrieve whatever it is the boss wants. But it's at this point where Pericolo explains once after setting the picture on fire, then explains through Moody Blues that now that he's done what the boss has ordered, that his final mission has been complete, and with that, proceeds to pull out a gun and prepares to kill himself. But as he does so, he explains that he has no regrets for giving his life for Passion, and proceeds to explain that now that the boss actually gave him a pretty good life and that he would willingly die for him. And with that, explains that they once again reiterates that they need to go to the place specified in the picture before shooting himself. And it's heavily implied that his body was the one that Risotto actually found, because immediately after, Pericolo returns back to Moody Blues and is retrieved out of the turtle. So he just kind of emerges from. So Moody Blues kind of emerges from the turtle because he kind of had no choice. Moody Blues just kind of gets teleported out of the turtle because Pericolo raised his hand and then shot himself. So he wound up being emerged from the turtle unwittingly by accident. It had no choice, but. But in case now that they know where they need to go, he then proceeds to send. Bruno then decides to actually send Mista and Bruno and Giorno actually go and find what they need and sends them to go to Venice. At which point they get in the car they stole and proceed to actually go through the road. Again, I don't know what it's called, but they go through the road that says apparently the only way in and out of Venice, Italy. Apparently it's on the island. It's on the island that the island of Sicily that the boot is kicking. Apparently it's on there, but they do leave to go to Venice, and the man and the narrator then proceeds to explain how it's the only road in and out of Venice, and that it's a very straight shot road, and that if anybody wants to go in and out of Venice, they have to go on the road. But in case they then proceed to actually in case on the way there, Bruno and Mista actually wind up shooting the shit a little bit, with Bruno pointing out that now that they've taken out Malone, there's only 5 left. There's only 5 of them left. There's only two stand users left, and points out that they'll likely be attacked at any point. But for the time being, they really need to keep an eye on it and just get to Venice and get what the boss wants from them. And it's at this point where Mista actually notes that the glass on their windows is actually getting a little foggy, but he actually kind of wipes it off a little bit, pointing out that even remarking that it's getting very foggy, and does try cleaning the windows, but Giorno merely points out that it's likely because it's just cold a little bit, and also proceeds to point out that there's nobody else on the road. There also isn't anybody else on the road, since they're obviously keeping a watchful eye for enemies. But points out that they're likely not going to see anybody since it's very late and everybody's likely asleep. At which point, Mista actually begins to relax, pointing out that if there's nobody there, he might as well just relax. But then he notices something on the window that he didn't see before, and upon closer inspection, discovers that it's a finger. And also notes that it seems to be on the inside of the glass. And also remarking that he didn't see it earlier, he then slowly puts 2 and 2 together and looks down to discover that it is indeed his own pinky finger frozen to the window, which does cause him to panic a little bit. But in any case, they then discover that Giorno actually winds up opening the window to try and see if they can clear out some of the smoke, pointing out that it's way too damn cold, which only winds up making it worse, and a bunch of blizzarding wind that just kind of blows in. Even though, as they point out, there shouldn't be anything because it's not even that cold. But in any case, they also wind up. Giorno actually winds up swerving in a panic, partly because the road is partly frozen, and also because he wind up being surprised. But which causes Mista to actually wind up being stuck to the glass, so he's unable to actually move. At which point they actually wind up hearing a voice. And what we find out is that Ghiaccio has actually wound up hitching a ride on top of their car, and has actually frozen himself to the top of the car. And it isn't explained yet what his stand is, but clearly it's something ice related. It obviously is something very ice related, and they even note that as well. But in any case, Giorno then points out that that it seems like whoever it is actually hitched a ride on their car, and sure enough, as he then Ghiaccio then proceeds to drop the picture that they digitally recreated, which is also revealed to be the same picture that Ghiaccio was not Ghiaccio, but that Pericolo was holding before he killed himself, and reveals that it was a little difficult to digitally recreate, but they now know that there's there's likely something there that the boss didn't want him to find, and sure enough, even points out that since it doesn't seem like the turtle is with them, proceeds to point out that that's likely that the two of them are going off on their lonesome to go and find whatever the boss wants them to retrieve at that station, and tells them that he will personally defeat them and find it himself. And sure enough, Mista eventually does get feeling back in his hands, but and tries to actually fight back against Ghiaccio, but finds out too late that Ghiaccio has actually frozen himself over to kind of protect himself, and sure enough, when Sex Pistols tries to attack him, they quickly find out that the bullets that Mista fired has no effect on it, and then two of the 6 units actually wind up getting frozen, but in the process. So yeah, Sex Pistols kind of gets taken out of commission almost immediately trying to fight it. But in any case, Mista quickly realizes that they're actually fighting a very uphill battle, and then demands Giorno actually stop the car and slow down. But Giorno can't stop the car and slow down because Ghiaccio has already frozen the brake in place, so they can't stop. And also points out that he can't stop the car either because the gas pedal is frozen in place as well. So he's just kind of perpetually driving and unable to actually stop the car. And also points out that the engine seems to have no place of stopping either. And also akins the idea to like the wind chill conditions that you normally do when you're driving, pointing out that the temperature actually drops the faster you're going. And sure enough, because Giorno and Mista are currently going way too fast, that they can actually move and fight back. That obviously they're going to freeze to death a lot faster, and remarks that it's likely -100 already. And at which point Mista asks Giorno if there's anything he can do, and remarking that he could likely turn this car into a frog or something. But Giorno merely points out that gold experience doesn't work with cold temperatures. Obviously nothing can be born at -100 degrees. So yeah, for those reasons, Giorno is just kind of stuck. And to make matters worse, he's also starting to freeze up and get stuck to the driver's side window, which is causing him to lock up. And sure enough, the car is starting to veer off the road because the road is obviously starting to freeze up a little bit. And Ghiaccio even points out that it's only a matter of time before the car actually winds up crashing. And also in the process, also remarks that he finds localization annoying as well. As he points out, in Paris, everybody pronounces it Perry, which I think is interesting. But he also remarks that that Venice is actually spelled differently in Italian, yet everybody just calls it Venice, which annoys him, since as he points out there are several famous plays that all have the name Venice in it, and wonders why they don't use the Italian pronunciation, and proceeds to kind of beat the roof of the car in the process, pointing out that, and it reveals that even though he's frozen, he can still very much move, because obviously it's his stand. He can make himself move as freely as he wants because he's the one controlling the damn ice. But in case, after Ghiaccio actually winds up expositing that little bit of outburst, Bruno points out that the only thing he can really do to help Mista is pick up bullets, since obviously there's not much else he can do unless there's heat. Pointing out that his stand needs heat to work, but and Mista kind of actually figures out exactly what Giorno's actually trying to, not Bruno, but what Giorno's actually trying to tell him, and proceeds to, and despite all odds, winds up firing bullets into Ghiaccio anyway, which obviously don't pierce the armor of ice that's surrounding him, but what it does do is provide heat that gold experience can use to create a new thing. And sure enough, Mista explains that that when a bullet is fired out of a gun, it actually winds up heating up, which actually enables it to become warmer for a brief period and eventually cool down, and which isn't likely going to happen anytime soon because it's made of metal. But he does point out that should be more than enough for Gold Experience to actually do its thing. And while he's at it, for funsies, he also announces he also calls out Gold Experience for Giorno, since Giorno's mouth is somewhat frozen and isn't able to actually vocalize what he's saying. But in case Gold Experience then proceeds to actually summon roots, which from the bullets, which causes Ghiaccio to actually fall off, and he points out, Mista actually points out that that roots have been known to actually break up asphalt, so ice is no problem. And sure enough, Ghiaccio winds up falling off the roof and hurting himself, and they are able to actually leave him in the dust a little bit. And at which point they finally manage to regain feeling and are able to actually regain control of the car. And with that, they proceed to continue to drive off to Venice. But Ghiaccio is still determined to actually defeat the two of them, and then finally properly summons his stand, White Album, which I should mention just makes him into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure levels of Iron Man. I do kind of like how White Album works. So it's at this point where Ghiaccio now using his White Album is actually winds up chasing after the car, and what we find out is that, and as Ghiaccio explains, the way a White Album works is that it is a suit of armor. Basically, that is if you can't tell by the picture. Basically, White Album is just a suit of armor made out of ice, in which that he can then freeze and thaw it as will, which is really, really cool and really neat. But yeah, he also points out that he can also that in addition to that, he also just has the normal ice powers that he's been demonstrating throughout the episode, and proceeds to kind of just skate after them, having created skates out of ice on the bottom of his White Album, and just chases them down by skating after them. It is kind of one of the greatest stands. I love it so much. But in case Mista then remarks that Ghiaccio is chasing after them, and they're going to have, and that Bruno is going, and not Bruno, but that Giorno is going to have to floor it. But Giorno points out that he can't go much faster. Pointing out that they are kind of reaching the limit, and that the tires are actually starting to kind of slip a little bit more because Ghiaccio is actually closing in on him. But Mista just continues to tell Giorno to keep driving, and eventually we do discover what Mista is actually thinking, because he then proceeds to recall the Sex Pistols that got frozen onto the roof, and then proceeds to use his gun to kind of block up White Album skates. Basically, he just uses Sex Pistols to kick the bullets into a way where they wind up getting lodged onto his skates, and obviously, since he is now going at near 60 miles per hour, he winds up tripping and hurting himself rather fabulously, and winds up falling over and kind of skid marking on the pavement a little bit. And Mista gloats takes the opportunity to gloat, pointing out that they finally lost him. But as it turns out, no. White Album's ability can actually freeze gases as well as anything else. And sure enough, he winds up turning the exhaust from Giorno's and Mista's car into a handhold that he then uses to scale up to the car and get a hold of it. And declares that he's actually not going to let them get to Venice in one piece. At which point Mista actually winds up panicking, pointing out exactly what I just told you, and points out in his own words how cold does it have to be to do this kind of shit. So yeah, basically the way White Album works is that it can just freeze anything, and it's kind of cool. But at this point where Bruno actually winds up closing it, winds up trying to fight back again, and Bruno and Mista try to fight back against it, but by that point, Ghiaccio has actually wound up getting into the trunk to actually block their line of view, so they can't actually see him, and sure enough, they tell him that they actually need to stop Mista actually tells them that he needs to stop the car so they can actually fight back, so they can potentially fight back against him, but by this point, Ghiaccio has already gotten into the car and climbs in through the back window. And sure enough, tells them that he obviously knows the rest of their gang isn't there. That that this is what he was after all along, and is prepared to actually freeze them solid so that he can kill them and then get to Venice to get what he needs to find Trish. But to this point, but in case, as he's starting to freeze Mista's hand and prepares to shatter it, Giorno actually summons Gold Experience to fight back against it and tries to throw hands with it, but it quickly becomes apparent that isn't working. Ghiaccio's White Album, despite being made of ice and despite being in armor, is revealed to be pretty much invincible and is able to take a direct hit from Gold Experience, cracking but not suffering any real injury. At which point, and all that really results in is Giorno's hands wind up being frozen, and he starts losing control of the car again. But Ghiaccio actually declares that was actually a very useless technique, and that obviously attacks aren't going to work against it. Giorno even remarks if White Album is indeed invincible. With no other option, since he's officially made it to Venice, they officially passed the border into Venice. But he decides that the next best thing to actually defeat White Album is to drive into the canal, and with that, he then proceeds to ram into the guardrail until it breaks and drive straight through into the canal, and that's where the episode ends. So. Yeah, I should mention, Babyface. So Babyface was a very interesting stand. That was the first half of this episode, and I did like how it works and how we don't actually see it, but his stand user actually winds up dying off screen. We don't actually see him, but he's implied to be dead. More to the point, I just like how White Album works a lot. I like the idea of it being of it not really being a stand that it fights back again for the user, but it's rather just a suit of armor that the stand user just wears and then just channels its abilities through it. And that's kind of interesting. I do like how White Album works. It is a very fun stand. It's probably my new favorite, but. Yeah, I do like this idea, but there is a couple of interesting things here as well. That's obviously the boss is kind of sort of seen for the first time as well. I didn't talk about it, and it's not really important, but it is revealed that he is indeed watching it's slightly revealed that he is indeed watching them closely, and hopes that and confirms that by now they must have gotten his message, and just does a little suppository scene where he tells them to bring his daughter safely to him, and kind of smiles, but we never actually see him. He's wearing a hoodie throughout the entire scene, so we never actually see his face or what he looks like. But we do kind of hear his voice a little bit, and since I'm bringing it up, also something interesting that I think I should bring up is that he's actually voiced by Kellen Goff, who's the same voice as Freddy Fazbear and the various incarnations of Freddy Fazbear from Five Nights at Freddy's. If that is very interesting to me, it is a very fun thing that Kellen just has this various things of voice, and in the English version of this, he actually does wind up voicing the boss, whose name hasn't been confirmed yet. I'm going to just point that out, but I should point out he has pointed out on Twitter that he has voiced the main antagonist of Part 5. I'm not going to spoil it for you, and I haven't spoiled it for myself, but he is indeed the main antagonist of Part 5. So I am interested to see Kellen just get his debut. But in any case, that is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and be sure to check out the links in the end screen as well. There's the top one's the most recent one, may or may not be this one. Where some bottom view is based on what you've already seen from me, so if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out my Twitch down in the description. I stream every Sunday, maybe expanding that soon-ish, maybe, hopefully, I don't know, but yeah, I stream every Sunday. We're going to be doing more Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is maybe a bad idea because it's kind of getting a little. Because that particular category is starting to get saturated, but I'm enjoying it. Even if nobody's watching it, I'm enjoying it. So yeah, go check that out if you want to try and justify my existence for actually streaming it. Go check that out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.